So the purpose of this info session is really to give you an idea of what the IEP does, who it is for, what kind of benefits it can have for institutions, and also practically what happens in an IEP evaluation. There will be a bit of time, especially at the end, but also somehow in the middle for you to ask questions. So please feel free to ask all those questions that you want to. You can do that either by writing the question in the chat or by raising your hand and voicing your questions in person. I will really try to keep track of that. In the bottom of the screen, you should have the reactions button where you can then select and raise your hand. And then in case you want to modify your view, so not seeing maybe everybody's faces, but only the speaker and their slides, you can modify that from the top right corner, at least in my screen, top right corner from the view. I think by now we've all quite used to all the different meeting tools that we have in use, but just a little reminder for those who are not always using Zoom. I have 4 speakers today who have promised to contribute to this session. Brian Norton from the IEP Steering Committee, Elizabeth Noonan from the University College Corks, representing one of the evaluated institutions, and Vera Strastna from the Charles University in Prague, and my colleague Tanya Dorth from the IEP Secretariat, who will give you also some information on the application process and the kind of more technical elements. So I think we are ready to go. We had a lot of interest for this webinar. We were quite happy and surprised also, if you like, about that. But I hope you will all find it useful indeed. And I repeat, feel free to ask your questions. My colleagues also, in the interest of time, might answer some of the questions directly in the chat. So keep your eyes on the chat as well in case. And some more substantial questions we might then pick up in the conversation. So without further ado, I would like to get started on the actual part of the program and with Brian's presentation about the IEP. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon for those of you in time zones where that applies. And it's a pleasure to speak to you at this description of what the European University Association's Institutional Evaluation Programme is about. I think the first thing to say is that the IEP, taking its letters in turn, is independent, evidence-based and professional. In doing an evaluation of a university, we do not seek to impose any model, any ethos, any particular organizational form or way of organizing a university on a university. What we evaluate is the university's own view of what it's about, who it serves, how it achieves its goals, and analyze its own capacity to deliver what it says it will do. Its capacity, if you will, to change, to deliver what it says it will do. And we do that by first of all, receiving from the institution a self-evaluation report. That report can be general, covering all the university's activities, or with prior agreement, can have a particular focus, maybe on international research, for example. And then we receive that report. We then proceed, obviously, now that report will have a self-evaluation within it. It will also have a SWOT analysis and will have a lot of data, because I did mention that the evaluation is evidence-based. So we're not evaluating assertions or claims, we're evaluating actual achievement. So the evidence, the student numbers, student progression, research output, etc., as appropriate to the evaluation. So we analyze that report. We then have 2 sets of meetings with a whole variety of individuals within the institution, from the rector to students, to academic staff, to leaders in particular roles in particular units within the institution. We do that initially online over a few days, and then would spend typically about a week at the institution. Again, a similar set of meetings covering the broad spectrum of people within the university, but also talking to external stakeholders as well within that week, and also getting the chance to see facilities, and get a more general context. So out of all, so what we're seeking to do, as I say, is evaluate the university's capacity to meet its own stated goals, the capacity for change, the capacity to have the effective use of resources, for example. But we do sometimes make an observation as to whether the goals that the university set itself are appropriate to the challenges that it actually faces. And it may become evident that, in fact, because often institutions have a very internal view of the world sometimes, that there may be particular factors that they've got so used to that there's no overt strategy for dealing with them. The culmination of the physical visit is a presentation to the rector, the vice-chancellor, the president, whatever the senior person is with the university, and also a broader presentation to our wider group. That's done as a PowerPoint presentation. And then subsequently, we produce a formal report, initially, obviously, for fact-checking, and then as a publicly available document. And then there is a follow-on subsequently, etc. And there's a whole range of potential follow-on that can happen. The panel itself consists of people who've been in a combination of people who've been in senior roles in universities, rectors, vice-rectors, deans, and such like that, sort of senior level. The secretary is usually a person who's been in a major role in university administration or quality assurance, or indeed in perhaps European bodies concerned with representing universities. And there is always a student participant coming through, and the student participant is a full participant of the team. And indeed, in my experience, for example, when we meet with students, which is part of what we do in the visits, the student participant would very much take the lead in that meeting to ensure we're hearing a genuine student voice as to how the university has served its students in the various diverse parts of its mission. As I say, one of the key parts of the evaluation is that we spend some time what I would call triangulating. In other words, there might be a certain view from the universities to how things are going. Is that view also held by the organizational units within the university? Is it also held by academic staff at the coalface, if you will, of teaching, research, third mission activities within the university? Is that same view as what the university's ethos, direction, etc., held by students who ultimately are what the university serves? So see the coherence of those across the piece is a key part of what we do in terms of the kind of questioning that we explore. As I say, what we are seeking to do is be the phrase often used is critical friend. We are seeking to be constructive, okay, and developmental towards the path of the university's development. So as with perhaps many quality assurance activities have some element of pass or fail, here it's a much more narrative, a much more subtle process where we are saying, has the institution demonstrated it has the capacity to deliver what it says it wants to deliver? And then another subtle question, is it what it says it's going to deliver? Is that really addressing the issues that the university faces? And the report really is going around those issues in some detail, looking at it from a perspective centrally, but also looking at the centrally of, if you like, the bottom up, the worldview from people at the coalface in the institution. My own experience of institutions is that this is valuable in terms of the exercise itself in producing that self-evaluation report hopefully brings together wide groups across the university to really think about what the university is about, what is it doing, for whom, why, etc. But the exercise in itself causes a consistency of self-reflection. And whilst perhaps reflection on the strategy of the university is the role of people in senior roles in the university, this is an opportunity to engage the widest range of stakeholders, both internal and external, in thinking through and agreeing a consensus as to what that strategy should be. But I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. We do not impose any model at a university. And we do not expect universities to be in any way uniform. By their very nature, there is academic freedom, there is diversity, there are different viewpoints, etc. So we're not coming out with a simplistic view that a university has any kind of corporate identity, which has to be consistent. I'm going to stop there and invite questions on what I've said, and then also we'll be answering more questions later on. Thank you very much indeed.
Brian, while the audience thinks about questions that they might have, you also have a chance to ask questions later on, because maybe it takes a while to mature. But I will ask you one question. What about the ESG? You know, we have this common framework at European level, the standards and guidelines for quality assurance in the European higher education area is the long name. We all know them as the ESG. What have they to do with IEP, if anything? Obviously, IEP celebrates 30 years, so it's much older than the ESG, which are not even 20 years old. So
yeah, I think there may be two answers to that question. One is there's a common philosophy, and certainly there is an idea that universities are serving students. That idea of student-centeredness, that idea that it's not serving the convenience of the academic staff, or it's not timetable driven, it's driven by the needs of students. So ultimately it's about student achievement and how the organization is oriented towards that, and that's a common feature. We'd have expectations that the various ESG criteria, in terms of clarity of processes, transparency of processes, rights of appeal, all those kind of things that go through all the different processes, will be there within the institution. But I think largely because of national quality assurance systems, you'd find that that would not, generally speaking, be an issue. So I think we're certainly informed by the ESG in terms of the relevant parts of what we're expecting to see in an evaluation, and I think there's an underlying common philosophy that which may be self-evident, but actually that higher education should be student-centered in its approach.
Very good. Thank you very much, Brian. We'll get back to you if and when questions arise as we go.
Thank you.
And I would invite Elizabeth from University College Cork to come up next and tell us how their experience at the University College Cork was with an IEP evaluation, eventually what they got out of it. So Elizabeth, are you there? Yes, she's there and she's trying to share, I suppose. Or colleagues, Tanya, are you sharing the slides?
Tanya's sharing for me, thank you.
Excellent.
So, good morning, colleagues from Southern Ireland. I'm very pleased to tell you about our experience of participation in the institutional evaluation programme. I think some of the points I will raise actually resonate with Brian and what he's shared with you already, although we didn't prepare together. So if you take us to the first slide, please, Tanya. My university, just to give you a quick view, founded in 1845. It has a population of about 22,000 students. It's an autonomous degree awarding body, which means that it has authority to accredit its own programs and to run internal quality review processes, but it is subject to periodic review by the Irish Quality Authority on a 7-year cycle. So why did we decide to participate in IEP? Well, the first point was that we had a new president appointed in 2017, concurrent with the new very ambitious strategic plan running from 2017 to 22. And so the IEP seemed to offer to us an opportunity to take stock of the university's strategy implementation at midpoint in the cycle. And also we were due to have our institutional review by the Quality Authority. So we felt that the IEP programme gave us a good opportunity to do an initial self-assessment and to engage people. Next slide, please, Tanya. So in terms of preparation, what was really important was having a representative steering group to undertake the self-evaluation, and in particular, to have university leadership team support. That was extremely important because it made it a priority in terms of the university's activities. I would say that we had excellent support and briefing from IEP colleagues, both in terms of the self-evaluation requirements and logistics. The guidance information, both the questions and the methodology, are appropriately challenging for self-reflection, and we found the guidance documents incredibly useful as part of our self-evaluation. In terms of the proposed externals, we were very fortunate to have a very productive dialogue with the IEP Directorate to ensure that we had the appropriate institutional fit between our externals and the type of institution we are. We're a comprehensive university, and throughout our preparation, we had a good ongoing dialogue at all stages of the process. We submitted our self-evaluation report, and our review site visit was scheduled for early April 2020. Next slide, Tanya. Of course, I think most of us will remember the year 2020 as being the year of COVID. So I suppose the story of UCC is about the reframing of an IEP review in the context of COVID. So the lockdown happened 4 weeks before the planned site visit. So in dialogue with colleagues at the IEP Directorate, we did discuss the strategic adjustment or reframing of the IEP review to include strategically the future state of HE delivery as part of the review. We had a very agile response and worked together to construct a remote site visit. I know it was the first for IEP. I think it may have been the first in Europe, but certainly that co-creation process, working very closely with the office, certainly had long-term benefits, both in terms of the virtual site visit, which took place in May 2020, but also for the university. I'll touch on that towards the end. There were some limitations in terms of the online or virtual visit. So the review panel managed to meet approximately 55 personnel drawn from staff, students, and stakeholders. It's not as many as ordinarily would be seen. However, the review team did note, and on the basis of many one-to-one meetings, that it was confident it managed to triangulate evidence and focus on some of the key features of UCC in framing its recommendations. Next slide, please, Tanya. So, in terms of the outcomes and benefits of the IEP process, as Brian earlier mentioned, overall the process is developmental in its ethos and operation, and that certainly translated in terms of our experience. As an institution, IEP does offer the opportunity to stand back, to take pause and evaluate institutional trajectory, strategies, and stages of development. It gives you time to call out some of the wicked issues that characterize higher education and to share those issues in dialogue with a peer review team, which in our case, we found that the advice we received through the dialogue on the site visit and subsequently in the report was really well considered. It was sage advice, and certainly the process provided a critical third eye or a critical mirror for the institution to self-examine its stages of development, as well as taking account of the broader European HE context. In terms of the overall benefits, it certainly placed a spotlight on quality and quality management as an important institutional development asset, and it also affirmed our current achievements in terms of the development of our own quality culture. It drew attention to complex internal governance and decision-making, which had some limitations in terms of policy, strategic policy implementation. And so certainly the IEP visit and review provided the catalyst to really reconsider those. And that raised some very pertinent questions, which informed a strategic pivot by the university, which started immediately after the IEP visit and represented a period of intense refocusing in the period 2020 to 2022. So it replaced our original strategy because we were able to make this adjustment informed by the IEP review. Our experience of working on the virtual site visit provided the basis of a revised internal quality review model for the COVID period. And we were the first Irish university actually to institute virtual review, and we maintained our normal program of review, which would ordinarily be approximately 8 to 10 reviews per year throughout the COVID period, starting from October. And finally, the biggest benefit, I guess, of the IEP process was that it served to provide a foundation for engagement with our quality agency review in 2023. So it affirmed our strengths, but it also drew attention to some of those areas we knew we needed to work on. So in summary, that's our journey, and I would highly recommend the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And before then we have a little session for questions and answers for the evaluated institutions. I will ask also Vera to share her experience and kind of outlook from the Charles University of Prague. So Vera, if you are ready to join us and share your presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Can you see my slides, I hope?
Now, yes.
I am coming from the Czech Republic, which is the country with a relatively highly prescriptive system and relatively closed country with the chronic problems of underfunding. But still, we are very much convinced that we can have good higher education. And Charles University is the largest university in the Czech Republic, public university with 22,000 of students, 17 faculties, university research institute, and this wide range of subject area from medicine to theology and sports. Of course, it provides all the 3 types of degree programs and has high degree of autonomy, which is the, I would say, autonomy which is not so obvious in Europe-wide systems. Because, for instance, till 2018, all degree programs of any university, whatever their quality was, had to be accredited by the national agency. On contrary, in personal and HR things, there is a relatively high degree of autonomy of faculties. So the autonomy is not always very well balanced, and it of course leads to relatively high fragmentation, especially if the institutions are large ones. But in 2017, there was a big change in the Czech system, because for those institutions which proved they are able to manage their quality assurance, there was an institute of institutional accreditation. And for Charles University, there was a challenge how to demonstrate that we are able to self-reflect and how to find advice, how to proceed further, because having the internal quality assurance system, there was something relatively implicit, but it was not obvious at Czech higher education institutions. And therefore we opted for institutional evaluation program, as we very much liked the methodology. We liked what it was already said by both speakers, that that is the formative approach. and also the critical friend's eye, which is extremely important, especially in the system which was and still, I would say, is relatively closed as the Czech one. And we were successful. The self-reflection proved that we gained later on our institutional accreditation for 10 years, but still with lots of childish diseases. And therefore, and we were pretty convinced that we need to follow up. Therefore, we underwent the follow-up evaluation, which on one side helped us with tuning our system of quality assurance, which had been developing, and also the university in 5-year cycles always prepares its institutional strategy. And in 2020, there was the right year to prepare the new institutional strategy, the strategic plan for the years 2021 to 2025. And we tried to use, not to lose the momentum, to use the recommendations of our critical friends from institutional evaluation program and turn them to the strategic plan. I already mentioned that the formative evaluation, the convenient methodology, which was flexible to tune to the needs of our institution, was extremely important for us. And as already mentioned, I think by my colleague, absolutely crucial is the involvement of the leadership of the institution, especially if the Charles University wanted to use it for its strategic milestones, like getting institutional accreditation or preparing new strategic plan. The process itself was extremely important. It mobilized the academic community, the students, because it was necessary to prepare the self-evaluation report. And as already said, the questions are provoking enough to let the community thinking about it. And also it initiated the discussion how our new strategic plan should look like. And for future, because we are again in the period where we need to prepare new plan for years 2026, 2030, we thought it would be very useful to use the institutional evaluation program for the third time, because the previous recommendations were embedded in our plan. So we now asked and we are very grateful it was possible, we asked the institutional program to tune a little bit their methodology and to focus more on how we managed our changes, how we managed to fulfill what we de facto had as recommendation and what we turned into our institutional plan. And of course, these are the important principles. Keep the momentum, develop further the habitus for change, continue. And in the case of Charles University, it's very important, and it was the leading recommendation going through all the areas of our activities. Continue harmonization and structural changes as much as the Czech legislation give space and maybe even a little bit more, because it's very difficult to manage the institution like Charles. And I think these were the main findings I could mention here.
Thank you very much, Vera.
Look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Vera. We have one question, but that is not so much for you. I will ask that to Brian a little bit later, but if Elizabeth, you also want to join us on the screen, any questions from the audience to the two institutional cases? Okay. No hands are coming up, so maybe people still are thinking about it, or it's not so easy to ask questions as well. It was quite a clear and comprehensive presentation. Maybe I would just ask, because you all, like you said, you need to go through your national quality assurance system, and we heard from Vera for sure why it was considered useful to have still also an IEP evaluation. Also, Elizabeth mentioned something like that. We also know that institutions don't have extra money always to floating around, and IEP evaluation costs money. Institutional, normally, if you have your national quality assurance system, it's somehow included in your funding model, or it's free of additional charges. So who would you think the IEP, if you would say this is the kind of situation when it can be most useful, what would you say to another institution? Do it now or do it later, or don't do it, it's not for you. When is the best, and what type of situation do you think this is really where IEP could help? Vera, Elizabeth?
Yes, if I may,
yes,
Charles University decided to use this evaluation when there were some strategic milestones, if I may, to call it like that. Yeah. Because the institutional accreditation, it was, I would say, not so deep change as we expected, because as I said, our system is very prescriptive. So we got lots of prescriptions how the programs have to look like and what standards they have to follow, which a little bit harmed the, I would say, the area of development of the university in the teaching and learning activities. But on contrary, this view from outside, from people who are experienced, who have the European view or even further, is extremely important once you want to play a certain role in higher education. It's international from the definition, especially the research, but teaching as well, I would say. So for us, it was important when we designed strategy to have this, I would say, international mirror.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Is there something you would like to add, Elizabeth, or give your own view?
Certainly, I agree in terms of the strategic imperative to do it. I think in our case, we were at a particular point in our development where we had come out of recessionary and contracted funding arrangements. So we were entering a period of change and expansion, and it was really useful to have the wisdom of an external peer panel to check ourselves, really. So thank you, that's all.
Excellent, good, thank you. Gunther. You can
hello, I'm from University of Applied Arts, Vienna. And I'm not sure whether I'm at the right time point with my question, but I thought maybe it fits here. As we have our audit, which is nationally prescribed, and within our accredited QA and quality development system, we have peer reviews of study programs and departments. And so I would like to ask whether IEP also operates in the field of the arts and on department level, which certainly brings about a certain change in terms of the size of the procedure and so on. But we would be very interested to find new agencies which can support us with this, because we are planning to do a lot of these exercises, self-financed, by the way. So yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. For the moment, I think IEP has never evaluated a department or faculty, but Brian, maybe you can also help me with that. Yes, Brian.
Yes. First of all, as I said earlier on, we don't prescribe institutions. So an institution that deals with just one subject, arts, for example, or it could be wholly postgraduate or whatever, are perfectly within the remit. So we evaluate an institution in terms of how it wants to achieve its goals. So if its goals are to be an arts institution, we evaluate that. We don't, as the name implies, it tends to be institutional evaluation. And what we're actually concerned about, which complements the kind of departmental subject evaluation, is how the university as a whole, how the sum is greater than the parts. So we don't get down to departmental level in terms of evaluation, but we are looking at each department as to how they're working together, where there's coherence, similar goals, for example, some kind of common ethos, those things. But we don't do, if you like, departmental evaluation in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I saved the other questions, still LGS question, to later on, but now I'll give the floor to Tanya, my colleague, who will tell you something a little bit more about the practicalities of the IEP evaluation. Tanya, are you there? We can't hear you for sure.
Yep,
yes.
I'm here with voice and image. I'm closing the camera for...
Don't worry about closing the cameras. That's
okay. Then I will share my screen. Give me 2 seconds. No. Yes. You have it? No.
We can see your folder, but not your presentation.
Okay, I can see my presentation.
Okay, we can only see the folder. Try again.
Seconds. Wait a minute.
Okay, if
yes.
not, you can make,
Cecilia is going to share the screen and will turn the pages for me.
Excellent, good.
So I will sort of summarize the 7 steps that universities or institutions go through when we do an evaluation. It's coming.
Yes, we see it. We see also the side panel. If you close that, we see it bigger. Excellent.
Yes, you can go to the next one.
Yes, you can go ahead, Tanya.
Yeah, you can go to the... Okay, so these are the 7 steps universities go through. The first one is the registration, and that's in this year is between March and until the end of May. And that's the time when the IEP Secretariat is open for queries if you are not completely sure about signing up or not, or just filling in your registration form and sending it to us. Then the next step are all the preliminary arrangements, and that's usually between July and October 2024. So that would be signing the contracts, agreeing the payment, the university to suggest dates for the online meetings and the site visits, or just the site visit if it's an IEP follow-up evaluation. And we usually offer a preliminary video conference so we can meet, the IEP Secretariat meets with the contact person and the main people taking part of on the evaluation, so we can see together that the objectives of the evaluation are clear for you and for us, and to give you guidance on the following steps. The next step, it's all on the university, and it's the self-evaluation report. That usually is thought about 3 months of work from the university, and then the IEP Secretariat receives the IEP, the self-evaluation report at least 1 month before the online meeting. So the online meetings and the site visit are the next step. For the online meetings, it's usually the university that suggests a schedule, and it's done over a couple of days. And then the site visit is 4 days where the IEP team goes on site and visit the premises, but at the same time, we talk to the different people, and Elizabeth and Brian and Vera have touched on that. The next step is the evaluation report. So after the site visit has happened, the team takes about 10 weeks to do the evaluation report. The IEP Secretariat checks that, and then we send it to the university so the university can check if there are any factual errors that we need to correct. Once that is done, the evaluation report is sent back to the university and the team when everything is okay, and we publish it also on the IEP website. And then 3 months later, that's the next step, we have a follow-up video conference, the IEP Secretariat with the main contacts at the university to check 3 months after the evaluation report has been done. And then a year after, and as a final step, we have the progress report, which is written by the institution. It doesn't need to be a lengthy document, but it's just to see from the point of view of the university any changes or how the conclusions and suggestions that the IEP made were applied or worked for the institution. So I think I managed to do my presentation in 7 minutes or so. So now we are open, I think, to questions.
So now we are ready for questions indeed for all the speakers, and I will set it off with the Eljo's question in the chat, which is about what does IEP really look at? Does it only look at the learning and teaching activities, or also the other things like research, support structures, leadership? So Brian, maybe you could answer that.
Yeah.
How does the IEP look at all those different elements? There's a lot that is going on in an institution.
Yeah. The simple answer is we're trying to look at everything. We're trying to look at obviously teaching and learning, the student experience, research, third mission, facilities, resources, organizational form, etc. So we're trying to look at everything. How we do it, and I'll do a caveat to that in a second, but how we do it is have obviously the self-evaluation report, a whole set of appendices associated with that. There'll be a SWOT analysis, there'll be the numbers that describe the institution. Part of the evaluation team's response to the self-evaluation report might be additional information on particular things as well. So we get all that picture, and that frames a set of questions that we then address to all the relevant stakeholders. So we'll be meeting the rector, we'll meet the senior leadership team, we'll meet deans, we will meet researchers, PhD students, undergraduate students, external stakeholders, and formulate a view again as to whether the university's own stated goals, they've got the systems, the approaches, the strategy to achieve those goals in each of those categories. And I should say, going back to my earlier point, that we don't impose a model. If an institution wants a particular focus, it might be international, it might be research, for example, they can choose that. That's a discussion with the IEP Secretariat before a visit is set up, and also an institution can tell us that no, we're not a research institution. We're, for example, an undergraduate teaching institution, or we are an institution that's more oriented towards producing people who practice in a particular discipline, for example. So what we evaluate is framed very much by the university's own vision as to what they do.
Yes, indeed. As you hear, the IEP is very, let's say, personalizable to the institutional context and needs. And we have 2 special focuses on offer for those who wish. It's not necessary to pick one, but it can be picked. One, either research or internationalization. So if an institution particularly wants a special deeper look in one of those 2, they can indicate that to us, and we will make sure that's then covered specifically. There was also a question about the IEP reports, which is already answered in the chat. Are the IEP reports published? And they are. IEP is an EQAR registered quality assurance activity. This means that the IEP has been externally evaluated. Its registration in the European Quality Assurance Register was just renewed in the end of April. And that means, of course, that we follow all those requirements that are there for national and other quality assurance agencies. So that includes, for example, publication of the reports. So all the reports are published on the IEP website as well as on the EQAR website. Any other questions? You can
Yes, I have a question. Hello, good morning.
Yes.
I'm Mariana Alba from Webster University, and I would like to ask if this IEP report that you offer is above the national accreditation system that each country in Europe may have. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood. Could you repeat?
Sorry, I was asking if this report, the IEP report that you deliver for academic institutions, universities in our case, are also in line with a national accreditation or are completely separate and goes above the national accreditation, for example, the one that we have here in Switzerland with this IAQ and Swiss universities.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, so it is a totally different and separate process. It is not to be excluded that in a country, an institution will be able to use the IEP report instead of their national quality assurance report for the national process. But our criteria do not comply with all the different national criteria. There's a different set of criteria which have the common basis, which is the ESG, like Brian was saying, but they don't necessarily meet the requirements of a national accreditation. If there is a wish to use one process, both for the national accreditation requirements and have it in the IEP methodology, then we always organize a meeting between the national agency in question with IEP and with the institution to see if that can be done or not, because we are ready to change a little bit or add some elements into the procedure so that we are sure that the national requirements are covered. But of course, IEP has a very specific focus, so we cannot also distort IEP too much. So it really is then a kind of a conversation with the three parties to see what we can do for that to happen.
Yeah, I think I just add, Maria, because it is a very important question. And again, it's very hard to generalize because national systems are different in different places. But often an IEP evaluation is a mid-cycle activity that helps a university prepare for its national accreditation. It also there are often particular events, as Elizabeth mentioned, Irish universities came out of a recessionary period, and so there's a period of reflection that was necessary. Sometimes institutions are newly created by dividing institutions, sometimes institutional mergers, so there are changes that happen, and at those points in time, it's a useful external view in terms of setting strategy. And I think the other difference, and again, this is a sweeping generalization, so I know it doesn't apply to all systems, but national systems tend to be looking backwards, how institutions have done, whereas the IEP is actually looking to a large extent forward. Has the university the capacity to do certain things going forward? So it serves
Thank you, Brian.
a different role. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That is very, very important. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm working now. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you, Mariana, for your question. We have also a question of whether IEP is always in English. It is always in English because we have international panels and the report will be English. Of course, we can have an interpreter in some of the meetings if not everybody speaks English or feels more comfortable using another language. Also documents. We ask some documents, key documents, to be translated into English, but then also we try when it's possible to have also a person in the panel who at least understands a bit the local language so that they can do a first screening of some documents, etc. But we only do processes in principle in English. Any other questions or comments? I don't see any. Let me just check so that I'm sure I have the full picture. Vera and Elizabeth, would you like to add something as your last words before we close?
I think, yeah, thank you. I certainly think that the opportunity for critical mirror in what is, I would say, a low stakes exercise in the sense that it doesn't result in an accreditation judgment is incredibly powerful. And what I have seen in my own institution was the strategic pivot we did, which was so informed by the IEP process, which didn't actually provide us with the solutions, but asked us such suitably reflective questions that we had no option but to engage with them because of the wisdom of the panel. So from that perspective, I would really emphasize the developmental nature. And I think that's what distinguishes IEP from national quality accreditation activity. So thank you, Maria.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Those very kind words. Vera.
Yes. In spite of we could not use the IEP evaluation instead of our national evaluation. Was not possible. It was extremely helpful. And more or less, we used most of it in the end. That's important to say, above what already Elizabeth has said. And one very important thing for us, I don't know whether this is the specificity of Charles University, this process, which concentrates on the university as a whole, is extremely useful for us. Because in our Federation of Semi-Independent Faculties, it's very important to have something which helps the harmonization in the very good sense of this word. Not unification, and always it is useful for the academic and students to see the voice from outside. Because sometimes the university knows and feels these are maybe the places we should move a little bit. But it's always very useful if you have an independent expert who in very similar words says the same. So for us, IEP was extremely useful in spite of we had to undergo a very bureaucratic and I would say long-lasting institutional accreditation from the national point of view.
Thank you very much, Vera. I think what is it's very interesting to hear sometimes institutions say that the most useful part of the process, not of course, you know, without any disrespect to the experts, but it was the self-evaluation process. They say that was like 90% of the benefit was that we were forced by an external pressure to talk to each other at the institutional level and really critically evaluate what we are doing. Somehow it's maybe part of the human nature that if you don't really have to do it, you don't do it. And this kind of external pressure can help in that reflection. And I think the IEP's 4 key questions, which are really what the institution is trying to do, how do they do that? How do they know that they are achieving what they want to achieve? And what do they do to change? Are generic enough, but they also forced you really to go into the core of why we are here and what we want to achieve. So that's hopefully useful information for all of you. Anytime you have a question, you want to hear something more about it, or you have even a very technical question, we are always here and happy to answer any of your questions. Well, I would like to thank very much Elizabeth, Brian, Tanya, my colleague Cecilia, who put this session together, and to all of you who participated on a kind of what is in Brussels a very cloudy Monday midday. So thank you very much for your also. Yes, I mean, I'm sorry, but we are still all waiting for the springtime, and then we will, in 2 months' time, we will complain it's too hot. But nevertheless, I wish you all a very nice week, and thank you again for taking part.